Plus Audio Podcast Network.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to Orgasmica, the podcast where we talk about sexuality, sensuality, all things without being a taboo. My name is Novello, and I am a tantric guide, among many other things. And I have my most special guest. This is the second episode we'd record together, but I don't know which one is going to go first. My husband, Adam Mayfield. Hi, baby.
Hey, baby. Here, live in person, taboo-free.
Live in person. We're shooting from Guadalajara. The first episode that we shot was in LA. And you're here with me in Guadalajara. And I thought, let's record an episode. We have no plans whatsoever. I know a lot of things about you, as opposed to other people's.
Yeah, you don't need a plan. You don't need to do your homework on me.
No, I don't.
No,
I have for the past 10 years.
Yeah, you're forced to every day.
But then I always thought that I should ask you a question or ask a question for the both of us to put on the table so we can start a conversation, because our history is very complex and intense and interesting, I would say.
That's one way of putting it.
That's one way of putting it. Sorry, we need some light. And so we're adding some light if you hear a little bit of a noise. So, and instead of telling the story as in a chronological order, I feel like we talk about our relationship through questions and answers.
Yeah. Well, throughout the course of this whole process, however long this interview goes on, then we'll get the chronology of it sooner or later.
Sooner or later, maybe.
Yeah.
So I felt like there's a couple of questions that I was like, well, maybe we should ask each other these questions. And they're always intense questions because you know me. I'm an intense person.
Do I?
And I want to ask this question. Is there a moment when you felt I wasn't there for you when you needed me the most?
Yes and no. So early on in our relationship, and the only reason I know this is because you revealed it to me later, is when I was going through one of my major bouts of depression. My first in our marriage, actually.
Yes.
Lucky you.
Lucky me.
You checked out. You checked out mentally and emotionally with me. I didn't know it at the time. Not consciously. Because you hid it really well.
I did?
You hit it really well. You occupied your time a lot, and you were very polite to me. So, which is not necessarily, in my opinion, a shortcoming. For me not to have noticed it, at least on a surface level, I noticed it intrinsically, epistemically, what have you, but in some ways, I think that's a gift to, even when you're not there, to make somebody feel like, again, at least on a semi-conscious level, there for them.
Yeah. I think for me, what was happening in that moment, I wasn't conscious about it either.
Well, there you go.
Yeah, I wasn't conscious about it either, but I have never, and let's talk, well, it was.
Shuts down my whole theory.
No. But in retrospect, that's when I started really looking at myself. That's what I did. I did abandon you in a moment when you needed, because let's talk about this big subject, which is the subject of depression. I have never, ever, ever experienced somebody in a depressive state before, somebody close to me to that extent. I had never, and I'm not saying people around me didn't have depression. I just didn't know what it looked like from a really personal and close space. And so I didn't know what to do with it. I also didn't have conversations, neither in school, neither with my parents, neither with anybody, on what is depression. What, I never, and I think that it should be like a subject in school about, mental health, what it entails, what it is, what are the signs, all those things. Because I felt like I did everything wrong. Again, I didn't know it, but I just told you, it's you should go outside and work out, and you should do a grateful list and you should do. And I was doing all those things that I thought were going to help.
Yep.
Because I thought that's what depression was. And when you weren't listening to me, not because you didn't want to, but because obviously it's not like you knew better than I did when it came to depression. You kind of were like, I felt a little bit like you weren't taking my advice. And so I was like, well, I don't know what to do with this. Like, I don't know what to do with a person who's depressed. And so I checked out emotionally out of our relationship. And what that looked like was that I worked a lot. I left like at 8 a.m. and I came back at 9:30, 10 p.m. And when I came back, I was too fucking tired to like do anything. And that was one of what?
You still do that?
That's not true. I work from the house.
Oh yeah, good point.
What are you talking about? Now I work next to you.
Yeah, but you, my point with that was it sounded almost like you're in recovery from being a busy person.
Yeah, I'm in recovery.
And no, but it's sensational though. You're a doer.
I am.
It's incredible. Sorry, it's just the way my head works.
But it's not the doing that bothers me. Is the intention behind
it
the
wasn't.
doing.
Yeah. Now your doing doesn't avoid me.
No.
Yeah.
Or avoid feelings.
Or avoid
which is
feelings.
what I was
Good
doing.
point. Yeah.
I was working a lot to avoid your feelings because
Sure.
they made me uncomfortable. Like your
Sure.
depression made me really uncomfortable.
And I think that's fair too. I really do.
Yeah. I mean, it
Yeah.
is fair to a certain point, except that like I didn't look for resources. I didn't look, I wasn't, I didn't understand it. And in my mind, it was not my job to understand it in that moment, but I don't see it like that anymore.
Yeah.
But I did check out of the relationship with that. So yes, I did do that. And I did. Do you want me to answer that question?
Answer what
Too?
question?
The same question. Or you want me to answer another question?
No. God, there's so many things I want to comment on.
Oh, comment away.
On what you just said, but I can't quite. Well, okay. So couple of things. Like, for example, I have also since learned that one of the chief components of a healthy relationship is being there for each other, right? Sometimes I feel like, and here's, I suppose this is my first controversial comment on this show, that we can take the concept of codependency a little too far. And I particularly learned that upon coming here for the first time. It's very cultural. It's very cultural to be up in each other's shit.
Yes.
All the time.
No boundaries.
No boundaries. In fact, if I'm not mistaken, when I told you the definition, the alternative definition of boundaries, emotionally speaking, with regards to relationships, there's not a word for that.
No. There's no, I think that is fascinating. There is sort of like a word which is límites, which is limits, but it doesn't encompass, like limits doesn't encompass boundaries.
Right. So
And it
knowing
doesn't
that,
exist in the Spanish language.
yeah. So knowing that there wasn't even a word for that,
Yeah.
like told me everything. But I also didn't know that families like this existed. You know, we all have our own stories, things that worked, things that didn't work in our family. But I can't remember where I was going with this. Oh yeah.
It's okay. Keep going.
One of the things that you have taught me about being in a healthy relationship is the way it works. You put your partner's needs before your own needs. If your partner does the same thing, that's collaboration. That is intimacy. Not one person puts their needs below somebody else's needs, or rather, not one person puts their partner's needs above their own, but when they're doing it at the same time, there's that old adage about the difference between heaven and hell. There's a feast on both sides, but in hell, everyone's fighting for their own leg of lamb or whatever. And in heaven, they're feeding each other, never taking a bite for themselves. But it works.
It works because you're feeding one another.
Yeah.
And that is community. And that is, that's relationship. And I think it stops working in a relationship status when one person gives, but the other one doesn't.
Absolutely.
And then that is what happens, is like that.
And being classically, at least, in my opinion, because I haven't taken an AAI yet, but being sort of classically dismissive when it comes to attachment styles, right? I'm real good at being taken care of.
Yes.
Without taking care of the other person.
Right.
I've been doing it my whole life.
Right.
Right.
Isn't that also cultural?
I think so too.
I feel like the U.S. is very that.
Well, yeah, the way we celebrate autonomy in the U.S. is maybe partially akin to that.
Yeah. I mean, being and like moving through both countries the way I do.
Right. You have, you're a better expert on that than I am.
Well, it's just through my experience. I feel like there can be a middle ground to how we approach relationships and how we approach like life, you know? I feel like the U.S., like people in the U.S. are hyper independent.
Yeah.
Which then creates and they're very focused on boundaries, which then there's so much boundaries that they create, like they become an island on their own.
And we wonder why, with all of these resources that we have available to us in the United States, why the rates of depression are so high.
Right. And how the pandemic like sort of highlighted that.
Yeah.
And then I feel like in Mexico, like the community aspect is amazing, but there's no boundaries. And so then people are very on top of each other when it comes to emotions or expressions of that, you know? And so I think combining, you know, the community aspect of like, we can do this in community. Like, what do you need? Like, you know, like, let's give each other something. And yet I also need some part of my independence that it's just mine.
Absolutely.
And I think you and I do that really well in our relationship.
I think so too.
I always said that our relationship has come to a point in this moment where honestly it works really well for me, but it's probably somebody's worst nightmare.
Maybe. I don't know.
Because.
Think so?
Yes, because.
Ooh, why?
because we are very much together when we're in LA. Like we work from the house. Yeah. We eat all the time together. We're like, and we live in a 1-bedroom apartment. So we're very close to one another. Yeah. But then I will leave for 3 weeks and then you will leave for 2 weeks. Yep. And then we won't see each other for like longish periods of time, you know? And that
well, I leave, you abandon me.
Oh, shut up. Yes, because you go to work and I abandon you for my family or whatever. Oh. But it really works because I get to like miss you. We get to miss each other. And even though there is, when we come back together, a period of readjustment. Yeah. And we have to go through that every single time that we're apart more than 3 weeks.
I was going to say, I think it depends on the...
more than 3 weeks, I feel like.
Right. But a good litmus test that I've discovered for me is how well I'm doing when you're not there. So even though we're talking about a greater sense of intimacy and community and the benefits of that versus too much autonomy, this leans more on healthy autonomy, which in turn allows me to sort of gauge, how am I doing? How's my mental health right now? Right. And I can sometimes gauge that by how okay I am when you're gone for 3 weeks. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Same. You know, it's
Yeah.
like we balance each other in a lot of things, and we are each other's safe space. And so when we're together, we help. What is the word that you use? Not balance each other, but like you use a word that when we calm each other.
We emotionally regulate each
We
other.
emotionally regulate each other. So whatever happens in the world, we're with each other. We regulate each other. And so when we're not with each other, and I'm with my family,
Yeah.
which is love them to death, but they're also triggering us AF.
They're both. They can
Yes.
be. They're regulating and they're not.
They're
right?
regulating and they're triggering all
sure.
at once. Or, something at work or something in traveling or whatever it is. And I don't have you to regulate me. And also when you go into the woods, I don't have access to you.
Right.
On the phone.
Which, in all fairness, I completely understand why that would trigger you.
No, it's not a trigger. It's more like
I'm sorry.
It's fine. It used to be a trigger.
Okay.
It definitely
Gotcha.
used to be a trigger.
Gotcha.
Now I feel like it's more like, the person that, I will call in this moment to tell me like, okay, like let's breathe, let's sit down, because you're that person for me.
Yeah.
You're not in my access point in that point. And so I have to learn how to also get other tools and other people. And I have leaned so much into my friendships.
Yes, because you have friendships. I know I'm sort of black and white catastrophizing here, and by no means do I mean to do that, but that's another thing that I've learned from you by just watching you is how well you are in community with other people, how many friends you have, So one of the things that is very, very, very common with addicts is we have a very, very, very low tolerance for intensity, emotional intensity. Mm-hmm. We have a very high tolerance for emotional pain. Mm-hmm. So for example, a normal person will go maybe a day alone, right? Mm-hmm. And will think to themselves, you know what? I'm going to call a buddy to hang out with, right? Mm-hmm. Because that's what we do. We are collaborative, social beings. Mm-hmm. An addict will go weeks sometimes because the emotional intensity of being with another person sometimes, or the social anxiety that comes with it, is too much for them. It's outside of their window of tolerance. Mm-hmm. So they will sit alone and get lonelier and lonelier and lonelier because they have such a high tolerance for it.
For pain.
Yeah. Until it takes whatever it takes. It takes a come to Jesus moment. It takes
some addicts are relapse.
Getting this close to relapsing before they make a phone call to their sponsor. In other words, they have to get depressed before they will. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
that
it does.
example? Yeah.
It does. I mean, it makes sense to me
that.
because I've seen it. Exactly.
Right. You've witnessed it.
Yeah.
And I think that's a fundamental difference between the two of us.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like, you have taught me so much. You have taught me so much about addiction, and you have taught me so much about depression. And I remember specifically one thing that I said to you when we first started dating, like formally dating, because we have a previous story before dating, but
More on that later.
More on that later, maybe. But it's about, I told you this thing one day, and which was about medication for addiction.
Oh yeah.
I said, yeah. And I regret, that's one of the things that I said something out of my ignorance of the subject. And I said, I just don't understand why people take medication for depression or anything else. Like people in Africa and people in third world countries are just, why are they not depressed? And why are you guys so fucking depressed? And why do you have
Which
to
is
take
valid.
It is valid. But at the same, because I know it now, but it's a bigger picture, right? It's a bigger of like the social aspect, the community aspect, the money aspect, the chasing the rat. It has so many fucking layers to that comment.
It really does.
But I truly did not believe that people needed pills for depression. I thought, you guys are making this fucking shit up. Just fucking do the internal work.
In a way, we kind of are. Like what you say about people in other countries and developing nations isn't entirely untrue. I'm going to get a lot of flack for this one. I am not against medication.
No, you
all.
take it.
I take medication. I have for years. How do I articulate this, though? So we've already touched on it a little bit, right? How this sense of hyper autonomy sort of leads to depression because we're not collaborative enough. We're not in enough community, and that's how we evolved.
Yeah.
A lot of developing nations have not, quote, evolved to the point of having the technological resources that we do, or whatever the case. And they're living more in community.
Yeah.
Hence the lack of, or rather, dare I say, living with less depression. Right?
Yes.
As a culture.
Yes.
And
but I couldn't compare you living in the US and the business and wherever we're living in from other people that live in different circumstances.
Sure.
You know what I mean? It's just like, I did not know that. And because I did not know that, and I have learned from you so much about depression, about addiction, and I am mind blown that literally, and I said this at the beginning, why are we not being taught about this?
Yeah.
If you're not the only person around me that has depression and anxiety. I have many friends, like my best friends actually around me, they all have depression.
Particularly in the United States, is that?
In the U.S.,
Yeah.
yes, and anxiety, and a lot, and a couple of them do have or went through addiction problems.
Yep.
And also they're very high sensitive people because they're also artists, and that also has something to do with it, being a high sensitive person in this world. But why are we not being taught what the depression is, anxiety is, addiction is, so we have more compassion? Because I used to see addicts and look down on them, being like, well, Jesus, like he's a fucking addict. Well, fuck, like if he can't stop fucking drinking, like da-da-da-da-da. And I had that judgment. And when I met you, you were 11 years sober. And I didn't have that judgment with you. But then when you relapsed, I had that judgment with you too. I was like, why can't he just fucking stop? What? And then I took your addiction so fucking personal to me.
Yeah.
I was like, why are you doing this to me?
Yeah.
And that's because I had no idea about any of it.
Sure.
And it makes me so angry and honestly emotional. Like it makes me want to cry that the person that I love the most, like I couldn't support you in the way that I wanted to, just because I wasn't taught to do that. Yeah. And it's so fucking sad that we have to look at addicts and people with mental health so separate of the ones that we don't.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry about that. And I just hope that we can have more compassion and just more resources to learn more about this.
Baby, thank you. Not to be cliche, but it's one of the reasons why we are where we're at today in our marriage. Yeah. Because of all of it. Yeah, it's a catch-22. I mean, I'm by no means against medication, obviously.
Yeah.
Take it. But at the same time, if I had known back when I was 16, when I first went on medication, which is a long time ago, that's over 30 years that I've been on and off some type of medication for depression. If I had known then what I know now, I probably would have found alternative methods, or at least tried harder before I went on it. Yeah. My brain was still developing at that age. And we really don't know. We really don't know what kind of permanent structural changes
Yeah.
that being on medication and all the drinking and drugs that I did while my brain was still developing. I didn't know any of this at the time. Now, that's not to say that I would still have taken medication. I would still drink, et cetera, et cetera. I honestly don't know.
Well, it's a journey that you're on. And I think in the next episode, I would love for you to talk, because we're running out of time now, but I would love for you to talk more deeply about your journey with addiction and how the wilderness and woods was also integral in your one of your tools for addiction and mental health.
Yes,
both.
it is.
So if you guys like this type of episodes and want us to go deeper into it, because we can go deep. You and we can do deep.
Word.
You and I. And so if you like it, please let us know. And obviously I'll have you again, because I really want your perspective.
Thank you.
On addiction and mental health. Deeper perspective on it.
I'm honored to be here.
Thank you, my love. Thank you for sharing your journey. I love you.
I love you too, baby.
Thank you. I'll see you guys in the next episode. And you know where to follow Adam. At Adam S. Mayfield. And what is
that my Instagram?
Yes.
Oh. More on that later.
And I'll put in the show notes his website and everything.
Thanks, everybody.
All right.
Thank you, baby.
Bye-bye.